Hello everyone, my name is Dakota Potts, owner and author at PottsPrecision.com. Now I'm out here with two rifles because I've just done another video kind of comparing and contrasting entry level to more advanced ARs. And while I had them out here, I wanted to take the opportunity to go over some really basic points on the AR-15. Now, I will warn you, if you already know what you're doing with an AR-15, maybe you'll learn something from this video, but for the most part, this is really basic introductory stuff on how the AR-15 operates and functions. So, we'll get into it. This is a basic AR-15. This is a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 Sport. I'm going to go ahead and lock the bolt open and confirm that it's clear, and it is. I'll release the bolt. So the AR-15 is a semi-automatic, gas-operated, magazine-fed rifle, and the vast majority of them operate on a direct impingement gas system. There's generally two types of modern gas systems. There's direct impingement or piston. There's a few others. Most of them are relegated now to kind of historical oddities. They're not really worth getting into, but it's important to make that distinction. We'll see what that means in a second. But for those of you who might have a piston-operated AR or a related firearm such as the HK-416 or MR-556, there is a small distinction to be made. So there's two component groups to the AR-15, and we separate them with these takedown pins. So we have the lower receiver group. Now in the United States, the lower receiver, this piece right here, is regulated as the firearm, and the upper receiver group is firearm parts, and that's due to the way that firearm laws were written many years ago. So your lower receiver group houses your magazine catch assembly, so you've got your magazine release, magazine catch. You've got your fire control group, trigger, hammer, disconnector, and your fire control group also includes your safety lever. The fire control group is named that because it does what the name implies. It controls the firing of the firearm. The lower receiver also attaches some furniture. You've got your grip, and you've got your stock. Your stock attaches to the buffer tube. We'll get into the bolt in a minute, but the bolt carrier group, under the gas pressure, is pushed rearward into the buffer tube. And the buffer tube absorbs the recoil, the buffer assembly. So the buffer assembly is the buffer and the spring that's retained in the buffer tube. The buffer assembly absorbs the recoil of the firearm. It slows down the reciprocating mass of the bolt carrier group. And once the full stroke has been reached, the buffer spring will then decompress and push the bolt carrier group back into place. Now, we're assuming that we're talking about a standard AR-15 in a 5.56 millimeter or 223 Remington caliber. Other rifle calibers, pretty much all of the same will apply. If you're talking about a pistol caliber, rimfire, something like that, there's going to be differences in the operating mechanism, so just keep that in mind. On the upper receiver group, we have the charging handle. The charging handle latches securely shut to the upper receiver, and when you pull it, the charging handle will draw the bolt carrier group rearwards. That's how the charging handle charges or loads rounds into the firearm. So I'm going to place this down for just a brief second. So this is your bolt carrier group. It's made of a couple components. You've got the bolt carrier, and then your bolt. So the bolt is the piece that actually resides inside the bolt carrier group, hence why it's called the bolt carrier. You've got a firing pin, and the firing pin is what the hammer strikes, so that, I don't know if you can see, but the firing pin protrudes from the bolt face to strike the primer and ignite the round. Now, holding everything together, you have a cotter pin, that's the name of it, the cotter pin, and you have a cam pin, sometimes referred to as the roller pin. So what happens with the bolt carrier group? Well, the magazine sits here, the bolt carrier group comes, strips a round out of the magazine, and loads it forward into the chamber. The buffer assembly is going to push forward on the rear of the bolt carrier group until it reaches its forward travel. With this cam pin here, the bolt itself is going to rotate into locked position. So if we look at the inside of the upper receiver, I hope that you can see this. You'll see what's sometimes referred to as a star chamber. That's the barrel extension. The barrel extension holds the barrel, and it also has the lug abutments that the lugs on the bolt lock into. So each of these little protrusions here is referred to as a locking lug. What happens when this goes fully forward is the bolt will rotate into the locked position, and it will spin around to interface with the lug abutments in the barrel extension. Each of these lugs will squarely sit against the solid steel support. What that means is when this round fires, it does not matter how hard you push on the bolt, within reason. 5.56 millimeter is 62,000 psi. If you push hard enough, you'll break something. But assuming standard pressure round, you cannot push on this bolt head hard enough to retract the bolt carrier group rearward. This is how the AR-15 stays locked long enough that the pressure can dissipate to safe levels, that the bolt can then open, eject the spent round, and load a new round. This is necessary because of the sheer bolt thrust involved with a rifle caliber cartridge, which is why this is going to be different from a pistol caliber carbine, which may have no locking mechanism at all, where the mass of the bolt carrier group and the resistance of the spring is enough to lower the pressure to safe levels. But locks into place, the round fires. As the cartridge ignites, expanding gas pushes the bullet out of the bore. Some of that gas is tapped backwards into this gas block, and you can see just sticking out barely this little silver tube in the upper receiver group. The gas is directed backwards through the gas tube and flows back into the upper receiver group and interfaces with the gas key. That's what makes this a direct impingement firearm. The gas directly impinges on the bolt carrier group versus a piston-driven firearm where the gas will push a piston, which then drives the bolt carrier group. Your gas key is the component on the top of the bolt carrier group. In some designs, it's machined as a single piece with your bolt carrier group. In others, such as this one, it's screwed down, and then the metal is then deformed in a process known as staking. Staking the metal prevents the screws from coming loose under repeated operation. So, bolt carrier group goes forward, bolt rotates, locks into place, round fires. Bullet goes out of the bore, gas comes back and pushes on the gas key. Remember that the bolt is still locked in place in the barrel extension, so now the bolt carrier group is coming backwards, and this cam pin forces the bolt head to rotate through the rearward motion. That unlocks the firearm. Now, your bolt carrier group and your bolt are traveling rearward. If I take a round, your bolt has two components inside of it. It's got an extractor right here and an ejector. Now the extractor holds on to the cartridge, and it's going to be very hard to defeat the ejector, but you can get the idea. The extractor holds on to the rim of the cartridge, and the ejector does exactly what's happening here. Pardon the interruption. The ejector pushes the spent case, or live case if you're clearing a live case, out of the ejection port. Your bolt carrier group continues to draw rearward, compressing the buffer assembly. Once it reaches the far stroke, the buffer assembly pushes it forward, and the process begins again. Now, just to show you, we have charging handle and the bolt carrier group. The charging handle nestles over the bolt carrier group like so. And this is how it's able to draw the bolt carrier group rearward inside of the firearm. However, when the charging handle is pushed fully to the rear, fully forward, the bolt carrier group can cycle without affecting the charging handle. This is how we have a non-reciprocating component to the charging handle in a standard AR-15. You may notice in the earlier firearm you had a reciprocating charging handle, and that's also true of other firearms such as the SCAR or the AK. That's a basic, high-level overview of how the AR-15 operates. Now, what I wanted to do is not get into all of the specifics of everything that happens, but for a long time, owning one of these, I didn't really know what was going on inside. And as I went to gunsmithing school and learned the cycle of operations of different firearms, I was able to tell and know so much more about my firearm when I understood how it operated. When I first owned a firearm, I couldn't have told you the difference between an extractor or an ejector, and if something went wrong with it, I'd have no idea what to do. By understanding the basic operating principles of your AR-15, you can better understand the physical mechanisms that happen to operate it, better diagnose issues with the firearm, better tune it for the performance that you're seeking, and as a whole be able to gather much more information about the operation of the firearm and keep it running the way that you want it to. So, let's go ahead and put this back together. The charging handle has two tabs which line up with a little keyed slot inside the upper receiver group. Take your bolt carrier. It's easiest to do this with the upper receiver upside down because then you're working with gravity, not against it. Now your bolt carrier group just nestles inside of there. And you'll know it's installed when it's totally flush with the rear of the upper receiver. It's not sticking out. It may stick out like that. This is where the bolt has entered the barrel extension, but it has not fully rotated. So as I push the bolt carrier group down with my thumb, now it's going to go fully into battery and the bolt's going to rotate and lock into position. Now make sure your rear takedown pin is fully out of the way. Swing your lower receiver back in place. Push your takedown pin through. And you've reassembled your field stripped AR-15. Again, this is not meant to be a fully comprehensive video on how to take the thing fully apart, but I hope that it provides a good basic overview for people who want to learn a little more about their firearms and how it operates. And I'd love to hear from you. This is kind of a new type of video that I'm doing. I'd love to hear if this is helping you learn, helping you understand what's going on, how I can change my presentation, content, and delivery. But I hope you did learn something. I hope you found it informative and or enjoyable. And if you did, I'd love to see you subscribe, whether you're here from YouTube, Full 30, or my website, potsprecision.com. And I hope to see you around for another one. Thank you.